Okay, so I think we've got a lot of folks that have joined us already, so I'll go ahead and get started with our webinar. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the application information session for the San Francisco Nonprofit Space Investment Fund. For those of you who have joined us on previous Community Vision webinars, a warm welcome back, and welcome to those of you who are joining us for the first time. My name is Sarah Schwid, and I'm an analyst in the consulting department at Community Vision, and I'll be supporting today's webinar from behind the scenes. I'd just like to begin by respectfully acknowledging that this presentation is being broadcast from occupied and unceded Chochenyo and Ramaytush Ohlone territory. Community Vision recognizes that we have and continue to benefit from the use and occupation of their land, which is particularly important to mention given that much of our work deals with transactions of land. And we take this time to honor the land itself and the Ohlone people, past, present, and future generations. So just a couple quick housekeeping items, and then I'll turn it over to our presenters. This webinar is being recorded. A recording will be sent to everybody following the presentation, as well as the slide deck and any resources that were mentioned during the presentation. Please type your questions in the chat at any time. This actually doesn't have a Q&A box because it's a meeting, so just please use the chat, and we'll answer them at the end of the webinar and as we are able to during the webinar. So now I'll turn it over to Jessica Townsend, Senior Program Analyst, and Risa Blumlein-Keeper, Managing Consultant, who are presenting today.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Sarah. You could move to the next slide with our agenda. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this evening to hear about this program. This is our agenda. So we're going to start with a quick introduction here, and then an overview of Community Vision as a whole. We're going to talk a little bit about the NSI program overview, and then we're going to dig into some details on the NSIF acquisition grants in particular. We're going to touch on the technical assistance component, and then we're going to have some time to open it up for questions at the end. Next slide. So this slide is an overview of Community Vision. We at Community Vision, we are a nonprofit organization. Our mission is to promote economic justice and alleviate poverty by increasing the financial resilience and sustainability of nonprofits and enterprises. And we accomplish our mission by utilizing 4 different programs. The first program is a consulting program, and that's where Risa and Sarah and I sit. This program focuses on helping organizations learn how to use their resources, whether financial or real estate, to maximize their impact. The next program is our lending program, and that program provides flexible financing to nonprofits and social enterprises that are serving communities which lack access to capital and opportunities. The next program is our policy program, which advocates for policies that are aligned with our mission. And finally, we have an investing program in which we can serve as a conduit for individuals to make socially responsible investments into the community. Next slide, please. This slide is an overview of the services that we offer in the consulting department. So whether it's helping an organization to figure out if they can afford higher rent, or performing an analysis of the historical financial performance of an organization, all of our services are about helping organizations to make strategic decisions in order to maximize their impact. Next slide, please. So to give a little bit of context here, the Nonprofit Sustainability Initiative was launched in 2015. And the goal is to help nonprofits secure new nonprofit-owned space and create solutions for organizations seeking long-term leases. And currently, we are in round 5 of funding of this program. Next slide, please. The Nonprofit Sustainability Initiative is funded by the Office of Economic and Workforce Development, and it's implemented in partnership with the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development, as well as the San Francisco Arts Commission and other key partners. Community Vision acts as the administrator of two programs within the initiative. There's the Nonprofit Space Stabilization Program and the Nonprofit Space Investment Fund, which we'll be discussing today. Next slide, please. So this slide gives us a little bit more details on the impact that this program has had to date. In previous rounds, we have awarded $8 million to 11 nonprofit organizations for the acquisition of 116,000 square foot of new nonprofit-owned space. And we've awarded $2.4 million to 47 nonprofits to occupy 258,000 square foot of space. Through our technical assistance program, we provided services to 57 organizations that were either at risk of displacement, so they had a lease that was terminating within the next 18 months, or they were facing barriers to growth. Next slide, please. So in terms of eligibility, across all of the programs within the Nonprofit Sustainability Initiative, these are the three core requirements. An organization must be a 501c3 nonprofit or a fiscally sponsored project of a 501c3 nonprofit. It must be located within San Francisco, and it must have a record of serving low income and historically underserved communities for at least the past 3 years within San Francisco. Next slide, please. And this is a basic overview to give you a sense of each of the programs within the Nonprofit Sustainability Initiative and what the requirements are. So in the next few slides, we're going to go into a little more detail about requirements and application process, but this is just to get us oriented. So within the Nonprofit Space Investment Fund, there is one grant-making fund, and it's for acquisition. The purpose is to support acquisition of new nonprofit space. So if you're purchasing a property from a nonprofit, that project would be ineligible to apply because it's not creating new nonprofit space. In order to apply for this program, you would need to have a fully executed letter of intent or purchase and sale agreement by the deadline of application submission, which is October 9th, 2020 at noon. And a consultation call is required prior to completion of the application. So please be sure to schedule that with us before you complete or begin completing your application. And also another requirement for this program is that the acquisition must close by June 30th, 2021. So we're really looking to fund projects that can move along and be completed within the next 9 months or so. Within the Nonprofit Space Stabilization Fund, there are two different programs. There is our financial assistance program. It is grant making that we intend to open the next round in mid-November. So please do sign up for our newsletter to get updates about when that's opening. The purpose of this program is to support nonprofits that are facing permanent displacement or barriers to growth. And in order to be eligible for that, you must have a fully executed lease or letter of intent. Our technical assistance program is for nonprofits facing permanent displacement, barriers to growth, or negotiating a lease within 100% affordable housing development. We accept applications on a rolling basis. In this program, your organization would be paired with a consultant at Community Vision to develop a scope of work to address any real estate related questions, issues, concerns you may have in relation to your real estate project. Next slide, please. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Risa.
Thank you so much, Jessica. And hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm sure you're all Zoomed out, so really appreciate you sticking with us for this hopefully the last Zoom hour of the day. So I'm just going to kind of move forward on what Sarah and Jessica shared about the program overview and dig a little more deeply into the Space Investment Fund, which is the acquisition fund underneath the NSI program. And that is the fund that's currently available now with applications due October 9th. So in this current round of funding, we have up to $2.4 million available in grants to support the acquisition of new nonprofit-owned space. And I just wanted to highlight that piece because it is a critical part of the program. One of the intentions of this program is to increase the amount of space in the city of San Francisco that is owned by nonprofits. So these grants are specifically made to nonprofits for purchasing properties that are newly owned by nonprofits. So, you know, that may be a question that some of you have, you know, on this call. We've worked with organizations who are purchasing from a religious institution or who are purchasing from a nonprofit previous owner. Those properties would not be eligible under this funding program. We're really looking to expand the amount of nonprofit owned space in the city of San Francisco. And then the maximum grant award is up to $1 million. So it's the lesser of either $1 million or 25% of the purchase price of the property. Let's go to the next slide. Although this picture there's some great pictures here. So these are all past grantees in our acquisition fund, and you can see Community Youth Connections, Compass Family Services, some really amazing institutions in San Francisco. So this is an overview of the program priorities when it comes to the acquisition fund. So we really look for candidates who are deeply rooted in low-income communities and historically underserved communities. And, you know, what does deeply rooted mean? Well, you know, it can be interpreted in different ways, but we really look at it as, you know, having a track record of providing services in that community, having relationships, both personal and professional in that community, being a part of that community or having come from that community, having strategic partnerships in that community. So really having deep roots and a commitment to serving that community. And we focus on low-income communities, underbanked, disinvested, excluded, historically excluded communities, and underserved communities. We also prioritize organizations who are facing significant financial constraints. So we really want to try to leverage these dollars to make the greatest impact we can. We're looking for organizations that have cross-sector support. So they've, you know, built partnerships across sectors, across industries, across government, private, what have you, and really strengthened their partnerships and their base, and that have a lot of buy-in, community buy-in and support for their work. We prioritize organizations that can specifically articulate how the new space that they're looking at or the proposed project will both retain the communities that they serve and engage, ideally, new communities. So what are those positive impacts on the beneficiaries of their work? If you're moving to a new neighborhood, you know, this is a big piece. How are you going to be connecting with that neighborhood? How are you going to be engaging with beneficiaries in that neighborhood if they're new beneficiaries or new to your organization or your work? Are you going to be bringing beneficiaries with you as you move? Or are you more deeply rooting into your current location in the communities that you already serve? And then lastly, one of the key program priorities is that the organization has undergone some somewhat sophisticated planning, financial planning, to identify risk, mitigate risk, put budgets together, come up with a fundraising plan, really have a good sense of their operating model, their revenue model, how moving into the building and increased costs from building ownership will be sustained through general operations, and really have a good sense of how this financially will fit in to their vision and goals. So let's move on to the next slide. So there are several program requirements, and I hope you've all had the chance to look at our program guidelines, and if you haven't, they're available on our website at communityvisionca.org/SF sustainability. And I'm telepathically pinging Sarah right now. Sarah, would you mind posting that link in the chat when you get a chance?
Sure.
Thank you. So our program guidelines are on our website. We've also sent them out in our communications, and I think it's an 8-page read, and there are a lot of critical pieces in there, but these are some of the high level key priorities and requirements. So there needs to be a fully executed letter of intent or a purchase and sale agreement. That's pretty much non-negotiable. We need to know that the purchase is moving forward, the owner is on board, and you're really in last negotiations for the deal terms, if not having already purchased the property. The grant proceeds or the grant funds need to be dispersed by June 30th. Again, this goes back to the program priority of urgency. So this is really a fund to address urgent real estate needs for nonprofits. So if you're not needing the grant funds for another 12, 18 months, 2 years, this may not be a good fit for you or for your project at this time. And then there is a 30-year compliance period. So the space needs to be nonprofit owned and operated. And there needs to be a deed of trust and a use restriction for nonprofit use recorded on the property. This is another key one that sometimes can be tricky for folks to navigate. So this is, guaranteeing 30 years of nonprofit use in the space. And lastly, it's important to schedule a consultation call. These are required, and the last day to schedule is actually tomorrow. The last day we'll be taking calls is Monday. And there's a Calendly link. Sarah, I'm telepathically pinging you again. Will you post the Calendly link in the chat when you have a second? Thank you. And the consultation calls are really set up to have a chance to discuss with us your vision, your project, and really get a sense from some of these high level requirements and priorities. Is it a good fit? Could it potentially work for this round? Could it work for a future round? What are the options and resources out there to support your work? And here's another picture of a grantee, Mission Kids, who's actually almost complete with their construction and hoping to move in and start preschool services in January, thanks to a grant from this fund. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So there's a review process. There's a selection committee made up of 6 members of cross-agency and cross-sector experts in commercial real estate and nonprofit management. And we will put together the applications that we receive and write a memo about each project and then present it to the selection committee. And then they review each application, and they look really for a few key things. They look at how the project aligns with the 5 program priorities. So is it deeply rooted? Is it serving low-income and historically underserved communities? Is there an urgent need? Can the organization demonstrate financial planning to mitigate risk, etc.? Speaking of urgency, the piece about urgency is really, as I said before, about leveraging the funds. These are city funds, so really leveraging these funds for maximum impact. And they look at urgency with a few different lenses. So does the project rely on this grant or need this grant? Is it a $20 million project and this is 1 million of it? Is it a $50 million project and this is 1 million of the budget? Is it a $2.5 million project and this is 1 million of it? So you can see the scale varies based on the project, and the need for the grant varies based on the project. Urgency is also evaluated by the timeline of the project. So you know, hopefully the fund can be dispersed by June 30th, that the project's moving along according to the expected timeline, and that it's really in process now. So we can leverage these funds to create new nonprofit owned space now. And then there's also a piece about being able to stabilize the organization's operations for years to come. So will this purchase for this nonprofit positively and immediately impact the ability for the organization to generate financial sustainability, grow financially, if possible, to meet program needs, hopefully better in the new space, and be able to sustain themselves operationally ongoing. And that includes the operation and maintenance of the building, which sometimes is overlooked and is a really key part of the budgeting and forecasting process, is really thinking about what are those increased costs. Yes, we'll be saving on rent, but what are those increased costs around managing an asset that we'll be having to grapple with. And then lastly, when the selection committee reviews applications, they'll look for project readiness. So, you know, again, back to the LOI, is there a fully executed LOI or a purchase agreement? Meaning, has the organization identified a site? Has the organization started conversations with the owner? Are you moving through the initial negotiation phase into, you know, finalizing the deal terms? Do you have a budget in place? You know, do you have fundraising sources that are realistic and reasonable? And do you have some of those sources already committed? What is your readiness when it comes to pre-development? You know, will there be architectural needs? Will there be engineering needs? Will there be other assessment needs that need to happen on the property? And do you have people in mind for that, or a process for identifying those people? And then, what is your overall organizational capacity? So how many staff do you have? How overworked are they? What other things are on the plate of the organization? Are you launching 3 new programs at the same time? Have you experienced a surge in your direct service, the need from your beneficiaries? Have you pulled back and you're offering virtual services and you have some capacity to take on a project? What is your financial capacity? Do you have reserves in the bank? Do you run a surplus year over year? You know, it's taking on a real estate project is a bit like launching a new program or more. It can take up to at least 50% of an ED's time or a facility manager's time. There needs to be staff time dedicated to the project, especially if there's going to be significant construction or tenant improvements. So does the organization have staff capacity, financial capacity to take this project on? So those are some of the things that the selection committee will be evaluating applications on as they're going through their review process. And here's another picture of a recent acquisition fund grantee, the San Francisco Conservation Corps. We were able to support them with both technical assistance in helping to put together their plan, and then also with a grant. So let's go to the next slide. So here are some examples of projects, nonprofit acquisitions that we would run through some of the program guidelines and eligibility requirements to see, you know, how these different examples might shore up. So in this example, the organization wants to buy a building for $8 million, and there's additional construction and renovation costs. So the entire project is slated for $10 million. So how much is the organization eligible to apply for? And I'm gonna, just because I'm sure we're all tired, does anyone want to throw an answer into the chat? This is like one of those old school Q&As, pop quizzes that you had back in elementary school. It's not really a trick question. Yes, Cheryl, yes, Lee, yes, you're all right. So Sarah, let's click forward and we'll show the answer. The answer is absolutely 1 million. So the organization's eligible to apply for the lesser of 25% of the cost or 1 million. And in this case, 25% of the cost is greater than 1 million. So 1 million would be the maximum. And as part of the selection and review process, if your project is funded, even if it's eligible to be funded at the maximum amount, it may not be based on how your application is scored by the selection committee. So they may decide to recommend partial funding or full funding. So we have a few more of these pop quizzes. Let's see what the next one is. Okay, so an organization is talking about acquiring the building. The owner's interested in selling, but may not be able to finalize the LOI or letter of intent by October 9th. So is the organization eligible? Any guesses from the chat? Cheryl, thank you. No, you're absolutely right. The organization is not eligible. We absolutely need a fully executed and signed LOI or purchase and sale agreement, PSA. This is a non-negotiable piece of the grant program. So we need to know that the property transaction is going to take place. Sarah, I think if you click one more, there we go. Yeah, so if the LOI is not able to be finalized, you would be ineligible for this round. But if there are future rounds, you could continue to work on getting the LOI finalized and then be eligible in a future round. And there is a look back period in this program. So for this round that we're currently in with applications due October 9th, there's a look back period to January 1st of 2019. So any purchases that happened between January 1st of 2019 and now would be eligible for grant funds. Let's go to the next example. Okay, so I think this is the last one. An organization purchased a building. The acquisition was financed with debt, equity, and a short-term bridge loan. They purchased the building in September of 2019. Is the organization eligible? And I think if you were paying attention, I just gave you the answer. So let's see if anyone was listening. So the answer, let's see, Sarah, do you want to click through? Yes, Lee, you're absolutely right. And yes, Maria, you're absolutely right. The organization that purchased a building after January 1st, so within the look back period, is eligible. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about the technical assistance piece of this program, because this is really a really key part of getting ready, what we call getting real estate ready. And we have some amazing real estate consultants on our team who are experts in nonprofit real estate and can support you and your organization in preparing for either a purchase or signing a long-term lease or whatever it may be that you're working on. So this program, the Nonprofit Sustainability Initiative, also funds technical assistance. And Community Vision provides that technical assistance to nonprofits free of charge to the nonprofits. And the goal of the TA program is to serve organizations who are facing either permanent displacement or barriers to growth, or negotiating for space, commercial space, in a nonprofit affordable housing developer. In a nonprofit affordable housing development, and they're negotiating the lease with the developer. So again, facing permanent displacement in the next 18 months. So you're either going to get evicted, or your lease is going to be up, or the building's going to be torn down, or what have you, or you're facing barriers to growth due to real estate constraints. Perhaps your programs have scaled or grown, or you've outgrown your space, or you have a building that doesn't have an elevator and you're not able to accommodate ADA access, and it's becoming more of an issue. Or, you know, you're facing other barriers to growth. Maybe, you know, you have something in your space that's really preventing you from being able to deliver your services. Or again, you're working on a space in an affordable housing development. So other examples of displacement risk could be that you're on a month-to-month lease. You don't have site control, or there's some other imminent reason looming in the future. And then for the barriers to growth piece, when there's an application on our website, if you're interested in applying for technical assistance, it's on a rolling basis and it's up now. So you can go and check it out, and Sarah will post the link in the chat. You would just need, if you're thinking about your request within the frame of facing barriers to growth, you would just need to describe what those barriers are and how a new or different space would create the kind of impact that you want to have in the community and your work, and also help you provide your services in a more efficient, more optimal way. And then this is a picture of our family coalition, who we were able to support through technical assistance in their lease negotiations. So let's go to the next slide. So here's a bit more about the TA program. Some of the services that we provide, Jessica outlined in the beginning during the overview of community vision services, but here's some more just specific to this program. We do a lot of financial planning and space planning. On the financial planning side, we work with organizations to develop all kinds of budgets, from quarterly budgets to program-based budgets to annual budgets to multi-year budgets and to capitalization budgets. So I think that's five budgets, different types of budgets, and then of course project budgets and sources and uses. And then on the space planning side, we offer something called a facility strategic plan, which is a process that we take you and your leadership team through, where you work with staff and stakeholders and beneficiaries to really hone in on what the ideal space is for you, and then think about it from a square footage standpoint. What are your office space needs? What are your program space needs? Are you interested in sharing space? And really take you through that whole plan, so that at the end of that work, you have a few key elements that can guide you as you start to go out onto the market and look for space. And then we also provide support in looking for that space and evaluating potential sites. So based on the outcomes of the space planning work, maybe you find something that's 80% of what you want, but it has, some things that you don't love so much. And so, it's not likely that you would find the perfect space in the perfect location with everything, 5 stars. And so just making those comparisons, what's best about this site versus the other site, so we can help you with that. And then, if you're looking at construction or tenant improvements, developing those budgets, project budgets, looking at a timeline, starting to really map everything out. And then we help with the sources and uses, which is the project budget that looks at the sources of funds, which speaks to fundraising, and then the uses of funds, which speaks to the project, whether it be an acquisition and construction and pre-development and soft costs, or just an acquisition, or what have you. So we help you look up your funding sources, your options through grant programs, lending programs, maybe some of your organization's own reserves or equity, etc., and help you put together what we call a capital stack. That is basically sources of capital that stack on top of each other to help you reach your ultimate goal. And then we also have relationships in the real estate community and world, and can refer you to lots of different service providers, as needed for your project. And I'll just pause here to make a plug for our resource center, which is a good reminder that maybe We can add a slide in here next time for that. If you go to our website, communityvisionca.org, and then navigate to Spaces for Good, you can see in the top, sort of in the center, there's a big heading called Nonprofit Resources, and we have a ton of amazing downloadable free on-demand resources for you to go and get right now. All of the budgets I listed before, we have templates, downloadable templates available for all of those budgets. We have tons of real estate resources about, you know, guides for negotiating leases and guides for doing some space planning on your own, and how to talk to a landlord, and just, you know, all sorts of things that we've built up over our 30+ years doing this work. Thank you. Sarah has posted the link in the chat as well. So definitely check that out as you think about what, if any, services you might be interested in taking advantage of through our technical assistance program. And then the timeline for this is that it's open on a rolling basis, and applications are approved or declined within 45 days. So let's see, let's go to the next slide. And I think we're kind of winding down here, and then we'll have some time for questions. So this is the application timeline for the current round that's open for the Space Investment Fund for acquisition, for nonprofit acquisition. Consultation calls, again, your deadline to schedule them is tomorrow, September 25th, and they're open through Monday, September 28th. And then applications for this round of acquisition funding are due no later than 12 p.m. on Friday, October 9th. Our target date for announcing the awards is November 18th. And then ideally, we are dispersing funds and you are completing your acquisition by June 30th of next year. So let's go to the next slide. And here's our contact information. Sarah will also put it in the chat, so feel free to reach out to either myself or Jessica if you have questions. There's a lot of great information on our website. And then I think we are ready to take questions. Sarah, do we have any more slides?
I believe that's it. Just thank you very much.
A thank you slide. Perfect. Excellent. Okay, so if you have a question, you know, we're here till 6. We have another 19 minutes. Please put your question up in the chat. Don't be shy. Probably chances are other folks will have that same question as well. And you're also welcome to take yourself off of mute, off of or onto video and ask it yourself. And in person, the air quotes, in person. Okay, I see in the chat, there's a question from earlier. Can people find a property on their own, or do all the properties come through Community Vision? No, the properties do not all come from Community Vision. And yes, you can absolutely find a property on your own. You know, definitely we encourage you to be proactive and get support around that. And we absolutely encourage you to go out and do as much as you feel you can and have capacity for on your own. And then as questions come up, you know, if you're interested in working with someone on our team, then you can reach out. And I also see someone in the chat saying, I want to open a restorative justice center that will house formerly incarcerated folks. We have an option to lease and an option to buy. Are we eligible? So this fund is for acquisition. So if you were going to exercise your option to buy and you actually moved through the process of getting a letter of intent or a purchase and sale agreement on the property, guaranteeing that somewhat guaranteeing that the acquisition would be completed, then you would be eligible to apply, but you would need either that signed LOI or that signed PSA by October 9th. And on that note, one of the services that we offer and do a lot for organizations in the community is called a lease versus buy analysis, where we can actually, you know, do some financial analysis on how your programs an organization operates, look at what sorts of surpluses you're generating, your reserves, and look at, we can model both, like what would it look like to lease a space, and how long of a lease, and how would that impact your cash flow and your budget. And then on the other hand, what would it look like to buy? Again, you would save on rent, but you would have other increased costs, and what would that look like over time? So that's also something that can be really useful when you're thinking about what makes the most sense, because acquisition is not always the best fit for organizations, but sometimes it can really, make a huge difference. And by the way, if I didn't answer your question, or you have a follow-up to your question, please feel free to add it in the chat. So I see the next question is, if we're not ready to apply now, when do you think the next round will be announced? We're planning, hoping, expecting, praying to launch another acquisition round in mid-November. Obviously, everything changes. These are city funds, and a lot of it depends on what budget is passed by the mayor, by the city. But hopefully we will be launching another acquisition round this winter. And as Jessica mentioned before, we've had 7 rounds of this program from its inception, and it's been somewhat regular with 1 to 2 acquisition rounds per year for the last several years. So if we're able to, keep the city funding allotted to this program, we will continue to run acquisition funds as long as we can. And then I see the next question. Sorry if I missed this, but when is the next cycle like this available? We won't be ready for this round, but would love to seek future opportunities. So yes, I think I just answered that. But Melanie, if you have follow-up questions, please either post them in the chat or reach out to me afterwards. Okay, I see the next one from Maria. Code Tenderloin is looking for a building. We're currently planning to lease or buy a building, but we're not ready for this round. Can we apply for the assistance program for support as we move forward to be ready for the next round? Yes, absolutely. That is one of the beauties of how this program is set up, and one of the great ways to leverage all the resources. So it's a wonderful way to start to get into the pipeline is to apply for technical assistance, begin working with one of our real estate consultants, and have them help you map out the plan forward. And you can even let them know, we're specifically interested in applying for a future round of funding. And, what do you think? Do you think, makes sense for us? When do you think we'll be ready? Help us map our way there. So yes, Maria, I think that's an excellent use of resources and a way to strategically leverage this program. And then a question from David: does acquiring or purchasing existing leased space from the Port of San Francisco, is that considered new nonprofit owned space? That is a good question. I don't actually know the answer to that, but I can certainly follow up with you afterwards. David, are you from Rafiki Coalition by any chance? Okay, well, yes, David, I can certainly follow up with you afterwards. Was that you, David, chiming in?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. Well, great. Yes, I've spoken with Monique a bit, and certainly, ready to follow up with you all to continue that conversation.
Okay. I have one more question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You guys keep referring to the 6/30/2020 deadline. Isn't that date passed already? I'm getting confused.
You mean for the disbursement of grant funds?
Yes, I mean, it's come up a lot, the 6/30/2020 deadline, but we're past that, so I'm confused about, we're talking about a date that's passed already. Is that?
Oh, yes. Okay. The date should be June 30th of next year, 2021. And if it's written 2020 anywhere, that's a mistake.
Okay.
So if you find that, would you please let me know where it's written so that I can correct it?
Okay. Yeah, I think it's on some of the slides. I was getting confused about You know, because the date already passed. I was just wondering, yeah, okay.
Yes, yes, of course. No, we're expecting you to twist yourself in pretzels and go back in time. Yes, yeah. So the disbursement date is June 30th of next year. So it's about 9 months, as Jessica mentioned earlier, that we're hoping to be able to, for the organization to complete the acquisition and have us disperse the funds for the purchase.
Okay.
Okay, I don't see any more questions in the chat, but we will hang out for another 10 minutes or so in case other folks have questions. If you also feel free to take yourself off mute or show your video if you want to ask in person. And thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited about the opportunity to support you all on your work and your vision and stabilizing your real estate spaces and creating more new nonprofit owned space in San Francisco.
Okay.
Also, I think it's worth mentioning as you're all kind of logging off, please also help us spread the word if you know of other folks who are interested in purchasing a property in San Francisco. We're really trying to get this information out to as many people as possible. And we know that sometimes it's hard to connect with everyone who's doing great work in community. So please, please, please help us spread the word.
Lisa, I think we have one question that came through the chat.
Thank you. Yes, so the nonprofit that helps animals would be eligible. All nonprofits are eligible to apply if they meet the other requirements. There are 2 exceptions to that. This program doesn't fund independent schools, and it also doesn't fund religious organizations that do not have an openness or do not welcome folks from all walks of life and all religious practices. So if there is a specific religious institution that has a requirement that people joining practice that specific religious practice, then that organization would not be eligible either. And I'm just answering in the chat. Someone asked if we could do another presentation for a group of nonprofits and community. Absolutely, we would love to do that. Please reach out to us offline and let us know what's best for scheduling, and we can definitely arrange that. And we're grateful for the opportunity and honored to be able to be connected to those folks. So thank you. Okay, if no one else has questions, I think we'll sign off and give you back a few 6 minutes of your evening. So thank you all again so much for joining us, and we look forward to being in touch and hearing more about your work and your projects. And please reach out if you have questions, and please visit our website and our resource center for more templates and more information about the program. And as Sarah just mentioned in the chat, she will be following up with the recording and additional resources and the slide deck. So thank you all for joining us. Have a great evening and take good care, and we'll see you soon.